There's a lot to say about Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Many consider it the greatest American novel, and regardless of what one thinks, the novel has a huge place in literary culture and I think more broader culture. There have been countless movies made about Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, spin-offs, etc. The approach I'm going to take in this video, which is going to be multiple parts, is as I'm going to talk a little bit about how Adventures of Huckleberry Finn helps us think about method. And in this first section, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of historical setting and of historicizing a novel, of putting a novel in its historical moment, and trying to figure out if that helps us with any particular interpretations of a novel. The first thing is that the novel was written around the tail end of Reconstruction, right, the late 1870s, and yet it's about a period about 40 or 50 years previous. So it takes place in the 1830s, 40s-ish, right, early. And now I know what people might say, which is, well, yeah, sure, that always happens, right? You know, novels write about previous times. But this was a big 30 and 40 years that was skipped over. You choose to go back before the Civil War and Reconstruction and write and place your novel within that setting. So right away we have an interpretive question. Why? Why would the writer do this? Or what can that tell us about what the text might be doing? It's important to note that there was a movement during this time, not just during this time, but during this time and previous, to re-mythologize the South and slavery. You had novels coming out which glorified plantation life in some really terrible ways. So the question is, what does Adventures of Huckleberry Finn do to this previous time? Well, it does a couple of things. And one thing to know is that there is a nostalgia factor built into the text through, among other things, the river. So you have a fugitive slave and Huckleberry Finn escaping together, but they do so along this river, which had drastically changed between the time in which the novel was written and the setting of the novel previous. They had cleared it away. It became a big river. They cleared it. They put dams and other things, and Twain himself lamented that. So there is this nostalgia, right, for this sort of pre-commercial version of the river. But that nostalgia, or that impulse to nostalgia, is juxtaposed by another theme occurring in the novel, which is that of lying and duplicity and story making, especially about who one is and their origins, right? The king and the duke lie about who they are. Huck pretends to be a girl. Huck pretends to be Tom Sawyer. Huck is telling stories to everyone, lies, in order to escape his situation or to get out of trouble. Right? The text cuts into the nostalgia of a pre-Civil War period really incisively. Huck, for all his flaws, and I'll talk more about those in future videos, but Huck knew Jim was being mistreated then. So one can't claim too much innocence about a pre-Civil War period if Huck, who is, uneducated, quote unquote, and poor, realizes that what's happening to Jim here is wrong. Even though, as I'll point out in the next video, he somewhat exploits that and goes along with Jim's mistreatment. So again, the reason why, or one of the reasons why the novel is written about the previous period is because, I suggest, it wants to cut into the idea of innocence. It wants to cut against the remythologizing of the South. Duplicity is everywhere, but also the poverty. The extreme poverty of the South is exposed along their travels through the river. By looking at the difference between when the novel was published, its moment in history, at the end of Reconstruction, and looking at when it actually occurs, we can draw an interpretation about what the novel's trying to do. And I think it's trying to cut into nostalgia, trying to counter the remythologizing of the South, and it's definitely doing so through exposing the duplicity and the lies that went on. So there's just not a nice idyllic. It's idyllic through the river, but it cuts into that impulse through the way everyone's depicted, through the way the characters are depicted. The text uses the characters and their interactions as a sort of social commentary, a commentary against the sociality of that region during this period, right? At least in a very purposeful way. Not to say that everybody was like that, but certainly the text is cutting into something about the sociality of the South and about the lies people try to push forward, lies about origins, lies about what we were, what they were, and those get cut through with in the novel.